What's up, gang? Tonight's video, I'm going to talk about a few things that I think are kind of nice to get off my chest leading up to a race. I really think I'm treating my YouTube more as my own little kind of personal journal, allowing me to vent, allowing me to kind of put myself out there and maybe even kind of ask myself some questions, as it's nice to fast forward after I make a video. I kind of rewind. After a couple weeks, I'll go back and watch my own video. I'm like, oh man, you gotta fix that. You gotta work on that. Like, you didn't take your time on that, or like that actually sounds okay. And see if I still have the same thoughts. And not to go all over the place, but I am going to talk about sobriety a little bit tonight. And one thing that definitely did help me when it came to when I was definitely well in my drinking darkness, we'll call it, is I started journaling a little bit. I wouldn't really call it journaling, but I was like looking at my depression from like an outside perspective, which is probably not common. And I was finding myself depressed every single night. I was coming home and I was just like, why did I go out again? Why did I go out? I didn't even want to do that. And now here I am. I know I'm going to be hungover tomorrow. I'm not going to be able to do the things that, but also a lot of motivation comes when you're intoxicated. Um, that's unfortunate. That's unfortunate that sometimes alcohol does kickstart to like, tomorrow, man, tomorrow I'm starting day one. I'm gonna start running and I'm gonna sign up for this, blah, blah, blah. And then the negative effect of the alcohol the next day, like kind of counteracts on that. And you feel like shit. And I was over that. So what I was doing was I was writing down thoughts, ideas, whether it was a business, whether it was personal, whether it was confrontational, whether it was supportive, maybe it was ideas that I wanted to do. And then my goal was to wake up the next day and see if I still felt the same way. So if you're someone that maybe it can't get out of a mental rut, maybe try journaling a little bit and write down some ideas, and don't be afraid to write them down. Write them down, voice memo them to yourself. I would text myself a lot. I definitely still have notes on my iPhone from that time. And I would just remind myself and just like, hey, do you still feel that way? Is that an effect on alcohol? Would you ever think that way sober? And if you aren't going to admit that you maybe have a drinking problem, you are kind of just proving it to yourself that you do. Because if you don't like that thought, but you don't think that way sober, and you only think that way when you're drinking, okay, so that helped me. Anyway, I want to talk about my Hyrox Chicago 2023. Some things that I maybe did okay in. There was definitely some pros in that race that I can take away and say, hey, you did that okay. And some races that I did last year that definitely negatively affected my Chicago 2023. So starting off with the negative races that affected my Hyrox and why I'm okay with it. February 21st, February 12th, 2021 was the day I quit drinking. Fast forward a year, I had done a handful of races, and I completed Indianapolis Marathon in like 3 hours and 31 minutes and had a great time. Couldn't believe I did it. Super emotional. And fast forward to February the next year, so like 1 year sober, I kind of started reflecting on the things that motivated me to quit drinking. Some of those were podcasts, some of those were YouTube channels, and some of those were people, and a combination of a close relative of mine that kind of pushed me towards like athletic brewing and running, and a close buddy of mine that also bartended here in the area that was about a year and a half sober ahead of me. He went out and knocked out the Leadville 100 and was just in my messages, just like, come on, man. He's like, if you ever met this guy, I mean, he's just such a he's like, I don't know how to explain it. Just an awesome, genuine person, very motivating. And he went out and knocked out Leadville 100. And that was kind of his, like, I needed that. I needed something that was so extreme to take the place of this negative extreme. And because it can't just be like, oh, I'm just going to go to the gym a couple days a week and that's going to keep me from going back there. It's like, that's probably not going to happen. Just going to your local community gym and doing a little workout. Like, usually people that come from some sort of addiction need that first step to be massive, and like, I'm going all in. And for me, I was scared to do that because I was afraid that like, I'm using this tool, running, as a tool that excites me, that keeps me feeling good, and then doesn't make me ever want to go back there. Now, if I do something so extreme that makes me, one, not even able to do this down the road because maybe I injured myself, or maybe I kind of like start demonizing running, like, hey man, I can't run that far, like that sucked, like I tried, I'm going back to the bar. Like, you got that's a scary thing. And I sometimes still to this day will remind myself, like, hey, the fitness world killed the habit. The habit is dead. It's buried. I don't ever think about drinking. I don't ever think about going back there. But does this still excite me? Do I still get excited doing this stuff? Does it still play a positive role in my life? Or is the training side of it and obsessing on the times now becoming like an alcohol? Like, is it becoming a drug? Is it becoming addiction? Like, is this, am I going to run this race no matter how good or bad? Am I ever going to do good enough to where it plays a positive role in my life? Because I have an expectation, but do I physically have the capabilities of living up to that expectation? Or am I just seeing what I see on YouTube and like, hey man, I know I can be within an arm's reach of those guys, but can I? Because those guys probably didn't have a decade of just binge drinking like I did. And I got to remember that I wasn't a D1 athlete. I'm not a college runner. Um, I'm hydrated. But anyway, like I got to remind myself, like, hey, just stay in your lane, man. And I heard one thing today on Lance Armstrong's Instagram was he talks about he's interviewing with a guy, and the guy's like, the best thing that you can do is get used to losing and be okay with losing. If you can be someone that is okay with losing, whether that is not winning or not hitting your goal, if you're someone that can take losing and be like, oh man, I was close. I was so close. I was so close. Other than being like, I failed. Like, there's such a difference there. And I train a lot of youth athletes, and I'm going to start going into my gym and talking to those kids like, hey man, get okay with losing. You guys all play a sport where only one person is going to win. But if you can go out there and every time you try to do a personal best, I train a lot of BMX racers, and a lot of them need to start racing the clock other than racing the people in front of them, because there's just so many levels of efforts out there, and there's anyway, they need to start focusing on themselves. And if they can go out there with not the intention of like fear of, I guess, like the fear of not doing great, so they dial it down to where they race an effort that they're okay with. Other than like, man, I went out there and I went way too fast and I kind of blew up, and that race is kind of ruined. Well, who cares? You're going to race 2,000 more times in the next couple of years. Like, but if you can go out there and be like, I don't care if I lose, I'm going to try to win. There's such a difference there. And I think Hyrox is a good race to where you can, one, you can respect it. You can respect the distance, you can respect the effort, and you are going to go out there and be like, I'm going to go chill because I know how hard this can hurt. Or you get people that go out there and like, hey, you know what? I do 6 of these a year. This one, I'm just going for it. I'm just, the second that gun goes off, I'm going to run every station as hard as I possibly can. And if I get to station 5 and I got to throw in the towel and walk off the course, that's okay. I'm okay with that. I've got another one in 2 months. Now, living in the United States, we don't always have that luxury, but this year, kind of do. We have some more USA races this year. I'm signed up for 4 Hyroxes in the next 12 months. I think I'm going to look at Chicago as it's time to go. We're going to race. I'm going to race this weekend. Because I can honestly say I put in the work. So anyway, let's talk about the races in 2023 that kind of negatively impacted Hyrox. So I signed up for Pikes Peak Marathon 2022. Pikes Peak, YouTube, Nick Bear. I was coming home pretty shit-faced every night, and I was starting to watch fitness, and I was starting to watch CrossFit, and I was joining my CrossFit gym that I currently work at, and I was getting inspired. But I was never able to wake up the next day. None of my journal notes said like, go to the gym. It was more or less just trying to like kick this fucking depression, man. But I was going home and I was watching these ultra marathons, and I was watching Nick Bear and him going from like a 4-hour marathon to like a 3-hour marathon and a 5-minute mile and a triathlon. And I'm looking at this guy as like, this guy just started from nothing. I mean, great. Yeah, he was fit, but like he had no engine. I mean, he didn't have any cardio in him, and he didn't have much muscle on him at that time. And like, he just said, I'm 26 and let's just get to work. And he did. And he documented it. And I looked at that as like, I'm in arm's reach to that guy. I was a good high school athlete. I was just a good athlete. I still think I'm a good athlete, and I was like, I can start, and I started, but it started around Pikes Peak Marathon. I was like, I need that extreme. So 2022, fast forward a year, I signed up for Hyrox. I'm sorry, I signed up for 2022 Pikes Peak Marathon. Fast forward the rest of the summer, spring and summer to the time of the race. I think it was like late September or whatever. I just wasn't able to go financially, schedule wise. It just didn't work. Luckily, I moved my race into 2023. Fast forward to like March, April of 2023, sign up is logged in. I'm good to go. I'm in the race. And I just didn't know how to train for a high altitude mountain marathon living in Davenport, Iowa. And on top of that, I was signed up for so many other mixed modality type of races like 5Ks and 10Ks and quarter mile uphill races that we have here. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And I was just doing CrossFit a lot. I looked at it as like, run 20 miles a week, do CrossFit, you'll be in really good shape. That is true. You will be probably in pretty good shape for about 45 minutes. And there's a lot of truth behind that. So anyone that's trying to just go from CrossFit to Hyrox, you got to do a little bit more than that. So anyway, we trained through the summer. I was just running in the middle of the day, middle of the heat all of the time. I was just like, this is my altitude. I'm going to go out and I'm just going to burn and turn. And my easy runs were just not that easy. I was running way too hard. My CrossFit was CrossFit. I was just doing hard intensity. And then I slowly started adding compromise running. So like Hyrox style workouts, way, 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 way too ahead of the schedule. Like I was doing like June, July compromise workouts all of the time when Hyrox was in November. So that being said, I was averaging like 18, 22 miles a week for Pikes Peak Marathon. And on top of that, we have a race here called the Brady Street Sprints, which I have won. I won in 2022 and 2023. And what that is, it's about 100-foot elevation, like, I don't know, 20% grade hill straight up for a quarter mile. And it pays. It's $500 to first place. And I take it very seriously. And I trained very max strength and very anaerobic for like 2 months for that. Very, very hard. I'm talking max effort deadlifts into max cal assault bikes, just very 200s, 400s, 800s, just killing myself that summer. So really burning a lot of the torch here in the summer, and just wasn't able to make it to November with really any sort of gas in my tank. Fast forward, I won the Brady Street Sprints. It takes a lot out of you, and then fast forward 2 days later, we have the Big 7. So the Brady Street Sprints is like a kickoff to our 7-mile road race that we have on Saturday, and it's 400 feet of elevation, 450 feet of elevation over the course of 7 miles. It's a very rolly, hilly, very competitive 7-mile road race. Did pretty well in that, and I had a lot of confidence going out of that. And then after that, it was just like, all right, I've got like 5 more weeks of Pikes Peak training. And I probably only ever got up to like 12, 13, 14-mile runs. What I was looking at was just how much load can I put on my runs. So I was going in and doing like modified Chad, like going in and doing a ton of weighted box step ups, doing weighted lunges, and then going out for like 8-9 mile runs when it's 100 degrees outside. I'm like, granted, there is something to be said there. I definitely built a tolerance for like heavy legs, but not being able to train with the lack of oxygen is the altitude humidity factor. I just don't think, for me, didn't play. People talk about, well, just go out and work out in altitude. Or go out and work in humidity, and that's like the Midwest altitude. I'm like, that's just a total different feeling. And so anyway, fast forward, mileage was still very low. Volume was inconsistent. My engine was never built. I never built an engine in 2023. Like I said, I think my longest run, you take out the marathons and the 50K, my long runs were never over like 8 miles. Anyway, I get to Pikes Peak, and I remember not feeling very well like the week of, and I still went. I remember like my second to last run, I went out here in my hometown, and I was struggling to hold like 10-minute pace. I definitely had something kind of lingering around, and so I get to Manitou Springs, had a great time, had a phenomenal time. I got up the mountain relatively quick. I got to the 10-mile marker. In my mind, like I got there pretty quick. I got there pretty fast, and then you get above the tree line at mile 10, and now there's no more trees, and the altitude just wiped me out. And it took me a long time to get up that last mile. And then you turn around and come back down. And you would think like, oh, you just turn around and just come back down the mountain. Like it's so hard. Like it's still so hard to put one foot in front of the other. Like my hips were blown up, my back was really hurting. And then you just had that mental fatigue of like I was delirious. Like it is the most beautiful marathon you could ever run, and I hardly remember any of the views of it because I was so just down in my feet. And anyway, got done with the race. Took me like 8 hours, and I was destroyed. And prior to that, I did a local 50K trail race in preparation just to kind of go get that one time on my feet training run. And that went fine. I don't think I was that beat up from that, but like you take the 50K, then 2 weeks later I was at Pikes Peak, then I came back, and then a month later I ran Hyrox Chicago. So I looked at the month when I got back from. Now that I'm thinking about this is just like one giant excuse. But I also need to build confidence that this year is nothing like last year, and my Chicago 2023 time needs to be buried because I need to bury that time deep into the concrete at Navy Pier this weekend. But if people are going to look at my like, oh my God, this guy knocked off. So let's say I go out and run a good time this weekend, and like, oh, this guy just magically knocked off like 9 minutes. I'm like, well, should have never been there in the first place, but I carried so much fatigue in Chicago in 2023 because I was just racing every race that I wanted to possibly do and didn't really train specifically. So had about a month to train for Hyrox, and I was just going in and I was doing like 25-minute Metcons, 20-minute Metcons, breaking the stations up, doing them as fast as I can, very little rest, just all over the place, like just not getting my pacing down, only pushing the sled as heavy as I could possibly make it, like not really pushing it for speed, not really pushing it for strength. I was just pushing it just to push it. And anyway, so let's fast forward to the race. In regular fashion, my phone died, almost died, and was running out of storage because I only use my cell phone. So anyway, we're back up, we're rolling here. Let's dive into Chicago Hyrox 2023. Time. My time was 1:16:32, hour 16 minutes 32 seconds in the pro wave. That was 10th in the age group of 35 to 39 and was 52nd overall in the pro. Now, that's just not going to be the case this year. Last year, Hyrox was a major, so the Elite 15 were running kind of like in their own wave. So that left a lot of people that would probably have also pushed me down my age group even more. But anyway, let's go over the breakdown of the workout. I won't go through every station, but I'll go through like the workout total as they give you these splits. Every station has a split, and every run has a split, and then the rock zone has a split. So I'll go over that, what that means here. Workout time was 35:51. And in a compared to average, I think Hyrox breaks this down to like 500 people that are like similar athletes to you, or like maybe just all the athletes in the pro men's division. They break it down on average to show you where you need improvement and maybe where your strengths are. To where if you think you need to push that a little bit more, maybe you don't need to. Maybe more go focus on that more because this is actually pretty good. And this is also another thing about Hyrox is that it just shows you that I know people call this a running sport, and it is a running sport. The best times are going to be from the best runners. That being said, I'm going to go over something that's going to show you that I could improve upwards of 10 minutes of this race and not speed up anymore. So anyway, workout total. Workout total for the 2023 race was 35:51. On the average, it told me that I was a minute 32 slower than average, and that checks out. Burpee broad jumps, sled pull, lunges. all were disastrous. My wall balls were like 5 minutes flat. And I think for my first Hyrox, 100 wall balls on a very bad race with like no endurance whatsoever. I just do a lot of wall balls. I've always done a lot of wall balls. I've done high volume wall balls. I've done 30-pound wall balls. Just do a lot of wall balls. So other than that, like the stations were okay. The burpees, the lunges, and the sled pull at least took up 6 minutes of that race extra that I probably will. I like to think that I'll get back this year. The run time, 34:41, 2 minutes and 20 seconds faster than the average run. That being said, I would still like to pull that down to 32:30, 33 flat, maybe. Get that down to more like 6:45, 6:40 pace. This is about 6:55, 6:58 pace. But here's where things get spicy. So when you are on the run course and you're going to go off the run course and into the rock zone is going to take you where all the stations are at. They're going to track that time as well. So you'll cross a map, you'll run to your station. Once you get to that station, you cross a map. So they're going to split your station time, and they're also going to split your rock zone time. The rock zone time is kind of like what could be your SOS, your I'm dying, I need to take a big break. You don't want that time to be high, but based on the person that you are and the training that you put in, there's a good chance that you might spend a lot of time there. And then for one, everyone's going to spend time there. But on average, on here, people were spending about 4 minutes in that rock zone. I spent 6 minutes and 4 seconds. This is where the lack of engine is starting to showcase itself. This is where I feel confident that I might not be able to do all the stations substantially faster, but getting to them, I should be way more efficient because I'm not taking these 30-second breaks after every single station. So that being said, I know some people say like, if you're going to do Hyrox, you got to get good at running. You got to get good at running. You just got to be efficient at running. You got to be a decent runner. And that's where I'm going to break this down. I ran an hour and 16 minutes. This weekend, my goal A, 105. Goal B, 107.30. Worst case scenario, I run 110 and it's a learning experience and I'm okay with that. I think you have to get into a place to where, like Lance Armstrong was talking on a podcast the other day, the guy was saying, it goes, be okay with losing. If you can be okay with losing, you're going to see massive leaps in your effort. If you look at your losses, whether it's a personal loss, whether it's a competitive loss, maybe like just not PR is what he's kind of saying, is if you could look at that as like fuel compared to like, I'm just not good at this. I suck at this. If you can look at losing as inspirational for yourself, you are eventually going to get there. So there's a blend between respecting the effort of this race and pacing it accordingly and maybe sometimes over pacing it. If I can tell you one thing, I've done 2 Hyroxes and I've never crossed the finish line and been like, man, I left some out there. No, this race has fucking kicked me in the teeth every time because I've not put in the proper blocks of training and being specific. Hyrox, CrossFit, triathlon. The best of the best are good because they train this sport specifically and they do it in blocks that make sense to make sure that when they are ready for their race, they're hitting their peak fitness. They're not hitting their peak fitness back here because they're just training all of the time, balls to the walls. No, they periodize their training into endurance, into strength, into intensity. Bam, it's race day. Let's go put this all together. I didn't do that last year. I was all over the place. My summer was intense. My spring was intense. My fall was just how much altitude can I go, unfortunately, climb and destroy myself. So I wasn't able to showcase really anything other than like decent running, I guess. So that being said, let's go over Anthony Parasini's time, who is Lauren Weeks' husband. He ran a 106 last year, and we ran identical running times. His time, I think, on the run was like 6 seconds faster than mine. And he beat me by 10 minutes. With 8 stations of fitness, he beat me by 10 minutes. So he's not as any efficient as a runner than I am, not any faster than I am. But the efficiency of pacing and doing the movements correctly, probably taking breaks accordingly when he needed to, and he just kept moving. I can promise you that guy beat me by 4 minutes on the burpee broad jumps. My burpee broad jumps were absolutely terrible. Let's see what they were. Burpee broad jumps were 457. Average was 358. Anthony's was, I think, like 202, 203. Now, granted, that's crazy. I'll take the 358. Um, but I mean, sled pull, 529. I was on average. Last year, I would say that the sled pull at Chicago was heavy. This was like the last race, one of the last races they used the old stuff for. I think with the new stuff, the sled does move a little quicker. My three push was 347. I do remember taking gigantic breaks on the sled push, but I still think 347 isn't that bad. But my run after that was 432. Run after sled pull was 415. Run after burpee broad jumps was 441. So my engine is slowly starting to die. But looking through all of these stations, like my run after the lunges was 510, and my lunges was 529. Like you can just see this race falling apart. And then you add the rock zone. So I ran an hour 10 for the race last year, and then you add 6 minutes of rock zone. So it just showcases, and I know I've got to be confident. I got to be able to look at this and say, look what you didn't do in 2023. Look what you did do in 2024. But that being said, it doesn't make the race any easier. You still have to go out and execute. I can still go out and run way too fast and ski way too hard in those first two runs, in that first ski, and I can ruin my race in the first 12 minutes. I can also do the exact opposite. I can go out there and maybe overpace myself and go way too slow, and then get to a point to where, like, yeah, even though I did go slow, I'm still pretty tired. Like, do I have the ability now to speed up? Because I'm still going to do burpee broad jumps. I'm still going to do sandbag lunges. But if I slow them way down for the sake of just like, well, I just want to just keep moving. I just want to keep moving. Instead of like, well, if I just do 10 really fast, but now I got to take a 20-second break. That's where the sport is just like the marathon. It's just like the marathon. You have to do it so many times to learn. And then once you get really good at it, then you train for months, if not years, to literally shave off like 60 seconds off a 26-mile race. And that's where we're going to get with this. We're going to get with this. I think I'm going to run a good race this weekend that I can sleep on, that I can work off of. And then we're going to run Dallas the following weekend. I don't have any expectations with that. I think I'm just going to go down, see a bunch of people that I haven't seen in a while. And I might just say, fuck it. Like, this is a cheap trip for me. I raced a week ago. I'm just going to go balls to the walls, see how it goes. And if I blow up and walk off the course, like, who cares? I won't walk off the course. But then we have Vegas. And then Vegas is going to be, I have a good chunk of time between Dallas and Vegas to put in another block and look at, and then focus specifically on the stations that are ruining me, instead of just like, hey man, we did a whole rebuild process. We did an 8-week aerobic block. We did a 5-week strength block. We did a 4.5-week speed and intensity block. Okay, but I didn't really get specific on I did all of the movements. I worked on all of them, but you know what? Maybe I need more work on the lunges. Maybe I need more single leg work. Maybe I need to just be more flexible, like just be flexible. Now I have this Vegas gap to focus on that. I have the speed. I built the speed. I have the strength. I built the strength. Now I just got to maintain those two, but now I've got to really start to get specific on the things that are costing me maybe minutes. Now let's just let us cost them like seconds. So anyway, guys, yeah, that's the goal for this weekend. Another thing is recovery. I didn't recover ever. I looked at if I wasn't working out, I was losing something. So being able to take recovery days and knowing that is just a recovery day was just as quality as my long run. Increasing my mileage running this year, I have never been fatigued from running because I simply believe that, one, I kept the compromise running, the Hyrox style running, away from my training until it was necessary, because that just does implement a lot of fatigue. And I want to make sure that there's proper adaptation, there's proper stimulus, and that I'm recovering the way that I'm supposed to, and then I can use that fitness when I need it, and it's coming soon. You don't need to do that fucking 6 months away from your race. because I was taking rest days. I was able to recover from my long runs because I didn't do my long run and then go do 5 a.m. class the very next morning like I would do last year. So you got to take recovery days. Hydration is key. Your diet is key. You got to eat food. When it comes to Hyrox, you got to eat. You got to eat. You got to eat. I send my clients that are working for this race this weekend, race this week, hey man, you got to eat. Start eating. Start eating. Start eating. You got to eat. So anyway, let's shoot for 105. Let's be happy with 107.30. And if it's 110, we got some work to do. So if you're going to be in Chicago this weekend, good luck to you. If you watch this whole video, I appreciate you. Give me a like, give me a follow, give me a subscribe. If you have any questions about Hyrox training, if you have any questions about sobriety, you can drop a comment below. You can find me on Instagram at TrainReviveYou. You can send me any sort of personal message if you want to keep things like that private. I don't blame you. I'm always here. Let's fucking do this.